access to the basic preventative and curative public health, those people can be helped to get out of that trap so that by 2025, everybody can meet their basic needs for nutrition, their basic needs for safe water and sanitation, their basic needs for public health, their basic needs for education. This does not promise wealth for everybody. It doesn't even mean the end of poverty in ways that Americans would know it, but extreme poverty, poverty that kills, that claims 11 million children a year. 11 million children a year dying of preventable and treatable causes. That can be ended by our generation.
You've mentioned that many of the problems in generating support for the Millennium Development Program revolve around a lack of knowledge of the problem, lack of knowledge of potential solutions, lack of knowledge of what American real aid is at the present moment. But a fourth element is not the lack of knowledge, and this was present in many of the questions that came in, and it has to do with a nagging doubt among people of goodwill about how to deal with the question of corruption. You suggested some ways of dealing with it, but the question comes in, how does the UN enforce good governance of its funds vis-a-vis the Millennium Development Aid? Specifically, what is a list of steps which it needs to observe?
It's a great question, and very important for me to stress one basic point. 0.7 of 1% of GNP would be something like $210, $220 billion a year, going from all the rich countries to the poor countries to help meet the basic needs for the poorest of the poor and help get development going. The amount that would go through the UN per se might be a few $billion at most. The vast majority of this money would not go through UN organizations. This isn't an appeal to support the UN in financial terms. We have the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, for example, which funds the fight against those three diseases. We have the World Bank, which provides more general development assistance. We have something called the African Development Bank, which can fund the roads and the power grids in Africa. We have Catholic Relief Services. We have UNICEF. UNICEF, that's one part of the UN. There are many channels, both public and private, that would be needed in this. And the part that is directly the UN side is a very small part. So this is not an appeal for $100 billion to flow through UN pipelines. Now, what can be done about this, again, is, in my opinion, understanding that in a way, the aid is a contract of mutual responsibility. It is a contract of solidarity. It is not simply a handout by any means. It's not a gift. And while it is an act of justice and an act of mercy, it's actually, in my view, a little bit more hard-headed as well, which is that it's only an act of justice and an act of mercy if it's going to be effective. And so I believe actually in putting some pretty strong conditions on this aid. I have nothing against conditionality, and I often make the analogy, if I hire a plumber, I expect the faucet to be fixed before I make that last installment of payment. Maybe the plumber will need some upfront financing for the parts, but the final payment comes after the faucet is fixed. I believe on every aspect of the aid issue, we need to have a very hard-headed approach, but measurable and practical. Let's get bed nets out there. We need 300 million bed nets. The International Red Cross and American Red Cross, UNICEF, and others have all sorts of protocols to do it, but let's insist that they really reach the poor. Let's have real mechanisms for the fertilizer to reach the poor, and so on. Let's be cognizant that when we're giving aid, it's to get the clinics actually built. There are ways to do this. In fact, all of the major auditing firms have come to me in the last few months saying they'll be happy on a pro bono basis to actually help oversee and create a business-minded approach to the actual implementation of projects. The governments in the poor countries are saying to me as well, absolutely, don't send us the cash, help us get the clinics built. So if we're consequent about this, very serious, which we have not been, to say we need to make these goals work. Now, what's the plan? And it's got to be a business plan. It's not just a matter of trust. There I'll go with President Reagan, trust but verify. Good slogan, that's what we want to do. And if we're consequent about it, we can hold that kind of problem to a limited level. Now, in a war zone, you know, we literally stuffed file cabinets with money in Iraq. That's not the kind of aid I'm talking about. You know, we lost billions of dollars in Iraq in a shameless way, but then when you try to get bed nets to the government of Liberia, you're told, oh, no, that's too hard. But it's actually a lot easier if we cared to focus on the real development challenge.
I have to read you one question that came in. It says, it's not really a question, it says, I have done a calculation. U.S. population is 300 million. Number of bed nets needed in Africa is 300 million. Conclusion, each of us needs to buy one bed net.
Now that's a macroeconomist. Send me your email. We want to sign you up for the faculty.
And this would be for both Professor Sachs and Father Hare. How will you deal with the argument advanced in White Man's Burden and elsewhere that development assistance really has not historically been productive? Or the alternative argument, Nicholas Christoph's, that healthcare has been effective, but other forms of economic development aid have not in fact advanced economic development.
The key is don't lump, but analyze. What Mr. Easterly did in a very unhelpful way was throw everything together and make a broad statement, this didn't work. That is absolutely incorrect. Many things worked extraordinarily well. After all, most of the developing world is out of extreme poverty. There have been huge advances in literacy, huge advances in life expectancy, control of disease to the point of eradication of smallpox, to reducing polio burden 1,000-fold. There's been a tripling of food yields, that is the amount of cereal produced per hectare. How anyone could say aid didn't work is really a little bit beyond me. What you have to do is ask what did work and what didn't work. What did work were targeted applications of proven technologies, whether it's the immunizations, whether it's the bed nets, whether it's effective medicines, whether it's Jimmy Carter's leadership and control of African guinea worm, whether it's the tripling of crop productivity in the Green Revolution, whether it's the big expansion of access to safe water, whether it's the spread of primary schooling. What did not work is giving Mr. Mobutu cash. What did not work is paying our thugs, because they were our thugs after all, in the Cold War. What did not work is going to war in Iraq and then paying massive amounts to our greedy and unaccountable companies, literally in shoeboxes of money. Who could ever support that kind of aid? What did not work is handouts of food aid rather than help with agricultural productivity.